This is the CineSnob Podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 223 of the CineSnob Podcast. I am Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
Cody, yesterday I made my return to a Comic-Con for the first time since this whole pandemic hit, and did some hosting again at the Big Texas Comicon. Something I did. I was telling my wife the reason I started doing it was all those years ago at I believe it was Alamo City Comic-Con, which I guess is gone. Like people had signed up to host the panels from the TV station I was working at, and then they just didn't show up. They forget it. So I was hanging around there like, yeah, I'll do it. And then they liked me, so I kept going back. So yesterday I was there, hosted the panel for Cobra Kai, which was fun. And then a panel with Doug Jones, famous sort of creature
Fishman.
performer, Fishman, twice over.
The Pan's Labyrinth hand in the eyes guy.
Yeah, the Fawn. One thing I had forgotten, he was Mac Tonight, the original. Do you remember that? You know the McDonald's commercial I'm talking about with the big Moon Man face?
No.
Like playing the piano.
I don't remember that.
Oh, okay. You're probably too young. But, he was there, for all of his work, but he was also there with a couple of other actors, Tobias Jelinek and Larry Bagby, two guys that were the bullies in Hocus Pocus. And he was also Butcher Billy or Billy the Butcher. I don't remember how it's exactly what it is in Hocus Pocus. So it was a Hocus Pocus panel.
Oh, a movie you famously love.
I don't like Hocus Pocus. No, I only saw it for the first time like 2 years ago. My wife made me watch it. I mean, it's a terrible movie, but you can't deny that it's become strangely this weird sort of millennial Halloween classic. I don't know what your opinion was of Hocus Pocus.
I've never seen it.
Oh, really? You've
Yeah.
seen the Mighty Ducks, but you never saw Hocus Pocus.
That's correct.
Seems like they'd be like the one and the same to you.
I'm a sporto, man. I
someone
watch
of your
them sports
age.
movies.
Yeah, you wouldn't be caught dead watching that girly witch stuff. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. Thanks to Garrett Killian, who's one of the owners, who invites me back. I didn't get to do the Giancarlo Esposito panel, but that one was a lot of fun. We watched it. You and I had that famous encounter with him at South by a couple years ago, where he walked into the Los Pollos Hermanos replicate. What would you call it?
It was like a fake pop-up kind of thing.
But it was like super well done. Like
Yeah.
it was like
I
a
think it
real
was the
like
actual
a real
set.
restaurant. It may have been. He was there and he walked in. It was a press event for, I think, Better Call Saul season 3. He walked in and started doing a Gus Fring improv.
Mm-hmm.
And we may have talked about this recently, but then just a bunch of dumb reporters started asking him real life questions. Most of the people played along, but some of the people there were like, "Well, what's it like working with Bob Odenkirk?" And he'd have to be like, "Oh, he's a very nice man," and then move on to
Well, he's
doing
trying to
more Gus Fring stuff.
improv in character as Gus Fring.
Right? Yeah, it was just a crazy the self awareness of the people there was not high on the list for some reason.
Yeah,
but yeah, it
he was
cool.
also there because he directed a movie at that festival as well.
Yeah, we talked to him. I talked to him briefly about that. I don't know if you were there, but I talked to him briefly about that, and he was very kind. He was very inspirational yesterday in his panel. Always good to see. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Speaking of that, one of the things I noticed when I was there was they didn't do the I've seen a lot of it lately. They didn't have there was way more people there than I thought would be there, and most people were wearing masks, but the celebrities were very Giancarlo Esposito, who I know is a very big vaccine proponent in Hollywood. Like he was out meeting and greeting fans, like taking pictures with us. My wife took a picture with him slitting her throat, so it was a lot of fun. But he wasn't like hiding behind glass somewhere. So I guess if you're vaccinated, you can do fun stuff. And I just got we got our booster shots on Friday.
Oh, look at you.
We're extra done. That it kind of wrecked me yesterday, but it was probably a bad timing to get the booster shot right before I was going to go spend hours at a Comic-Con, but it was fine. It was fine. Anyway, you have something to talk about too, Cody. Fantastic Fest at home. Last week you talked about your in-person experience. This week you're going to share the at-home version of that. So Fantastic Fest is over, right? Is this just this Fantastic Fest at home?
Right. So
is it still going on?
Yeah, the actual in-person Fantastic Fest ended not this most recent Thursday, but I believe the Thursday before that. Then it transitioned from the in-person screening to the at-home portion of the festival, which featured some of the movies that played there. Not everything that you saw in a theater was on the at-home platform, but quite a bit was. So, I got to be pretty selective when I was there in Austin and picking what movies I saw because I knew I'd have a chance to watch the rest at home. So, yeah, I wanted to just kind of briefly talk about two of those movies that I saw. One is a movie called Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes. And that was a movie that was pretty interesting to watch. It was. Did you ever see the movie One Cut of the Dead?
No.
Okay, so I don't want to give anything away from One Cut of the Dead, but this movie reminded me a lot. If anyone's ever seen that movie, it reminded me a lot of that. This is a Japanese movie where. It's really short. It's like 70 minutes long. Where it's like a time loop movie where this owner of a cafe figures out that there's a TV in the cafe, and then he like lives upstairs, and his computer and his TV are in a time loop where the TV is like 2 minutes into the future, and then like the computer is like in the present, and so. It's this crazy concept where like he'll watch something on his computer and then go downstairs into the future, or no, going into the past, and then like you'll see him like reenact the stuff that he just watched on the screen. So like you're seeing something happen on a screen, and then you follow the characters, and then you see them like do those things in the present. And so it's this crazy, like I don't even know how they pulled it off. Other than, and it's also like a one take thing. Now you can see like the edit points, like you can in a lot of these movies, but it's just this crazy exercise in getting in this time loop, and then they figure out how to push it further and further into the future than just 2 minutes, and then that creates issues and stuff like that. So it was one of those movies where I think the story was maybe a little bit lacking, but the execution was like super creative where. Again, if they're truly like having to, like reenact exactly these moments, or, I don't know if there was, maybe they were filming it from another angle and then had it set to loop or something like that with like practical video effects. I don't know, but it was really interesting.
So I'm reading the summary right now on the Fantastic Fest website. So you're seeing the same people in the shot watching themselves on this computer screen, then they go downstairs. Is that what it is? Or like so you're seeing them basically reenact what they just watched.
Exactly.
Okay. Wow. This sounds really cool. I think you sent me did you send me a trailer for that or something?
I did. The trailer's the trailer's not super representative, I think, of the movie, but it's one of those things where I think that. And it's all shot on iPhones too, by the way, which is another interesting wrinkle to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's done by I guess like a theater group in Japan, and they did this whole kind of thing, and I think that it has some really funny and fun moments in it. Like I said, I think the story might be a little bit too thin from a storytelling perspective, but it's really like when it comes out, I'm sure we'll cover it because I think it's a really creative kind of movie, and And like I said, it seems like a tightrope act that must have taken like a ton of planning out and mapping out, which is always fun to watch. So that one I definitely recommend. The other one I feel a little bit on the fence about, which is, as I think I brought this up last time, but this is Gwar, the documentary on Gwar, the famous metal band.
Oh no, you're disappointed in Guar?
A little bit. So,
sad.
I think I mentioned this on the podcast, but, I've seen Gwar probably 6 or 7 times in my life, and never on purpose. They're always one of these bands who were, like playing a festival, or I wanted to see a band that was opening for them, or, something like that. They became a festival staple because they're so much fun, where, they always had like hoses and sprayers that would shoot blue and green liquids, and then like they would have like basically whoever was in the news that year, they would just take out these giant like kind of puppet things and then behead them, and then the blood would spray everywhere while they played their music.
I think I saw like Jerry Springer get eaten by a worm or something once.
Yeah, I've saw Michael Jackson and George W. Bush and stuff.
I mean, this was the real Jerry Springer, clearly, because he doesn't give a shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, the documentary. So the thing about Guar is that Oderus Urungus, the lead singer and the guy behind the whole thing, died of an overdose maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. And the problem with the movie, and it's not necessarily the movie's fault, but it's missing his voice and his explanation of the band, because it's told through the eyes of a lot of long-term members. And I wanted to hear more about the sort of like shock elements of what they do, and sort of like the catharsis of what they do, and like the fun that they have, and how that kind of started. And really, the movie kind of gets bogged down by a lot of band politics stuff, where you go through each member and how they joined the band, and then the controversy that had them leave the band. And I wish that we knew more about Dave Brockie, the guy who was the behind the Odorous character. And there's some old clips of him talking about the band, but there's very, very little of that. And I think it's kind of missing his perspective. And again, it's no fault of the film. The guy's not alive anymore, but I wish that it was not bogged down in the band politics. So anytime it's talking about like the building of the costumes, and like the work that goes into, like they used to do really extended music videos, and they do like comic books and stuff like that. And the stuff that's surrounding all of that stuff, I think, is really interesting. And like the people that they've employed for years doing all of their effects and stuff like that. But when it gets really bogged down into like certain members and when they came into the band and when they left and how they left, I was not all that interested in it. So I think that Guar fans would really enjoy it as like a historical thing, but I don't know that anyone who doesn't know and isn't familiar with Guar would get too much out of it.
I feel like that's Guar in general. If you don't know what you're getting into, you're...
See, I don't agree with that, because I think because I mean, I didn't know anything about Gwar when I saw them for the first time, and I left having a blast. And I think they talk about that in the movie, because I saw them at this tour. It was like 2005 probably, at a tour called Sounds of the Underground, and they talked about how like a lot of the bands on that tour were like young bands, like in their early 20s, and so or even teenagers. And so a lot of their fans were younger and teenagers, and that tour sort of brought Gwar to the attention of like a new generation of like teenagers and young adults. And it really kind of like skyrocketed the second half of their career, where they were festival staples after that, because, people would come in and get exposed to them for the first time and have a really good time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got exposed to Gwar through like basic cable. I feel like it was on a clip of like Talk Soup or something once. I don't know.
Yeah, they talked about
a different generation.
Yeah, well, they also talked about how like that was Beavis and Butthead's favorite band, and so Gwar got exposure there. And then there's a lot, like there's a Talking Heads from like Weird Al has quite a bit in it, or Tom Lennon from like Reno 911 talks a lot about them. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, because they're the theatrics is sort of the reason why you go see Gwar. And the music for me was never really that good. I'll put it to you this way: I would never sit around and listen to Guar, but I would go see them live. So
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that. Like, are their songs good, or is it just the theatricality of it?
For me, it's the theatrics. For me, you can be at a Guar show and enjoy what you're listening to, but like, I don't think it's all that good music at all. But
well, okay.
To each their own.
Yeah. Cool. So is that wrapping up your Fantastic Fest experience, or is there still
Yeah,
anything
I mean,
else?
I saw some other stuff, and I think I'm just gonna, it ends. I think the movies officially go offline tomorrow, so I might try to catch one or two more. But I think it was enjoyable, and I think that I really like the festival sort of blending in person and at home that's been going on right now. I know that Sundance is doing that again in January, and so we'll see if that if I'm able to do that again. But the platform worked really well. It operated off the Alamo at Home or Alamo On Demand app. So like Alamo Drafthouse has their own streaming app, and so it just basically gives you access to all the movies, and then you have like 48 hours to watch it once you hit play. So I found it really enjoyable, and I think that it was a great extension of the festival. And I'll be interested to see. I'm assuming it'll go back to normal next year, hopefully. With any luck, but
we'll see.
It was a good substitute, I think. I think that was well done.
Cool. All right. Anything else before we move on?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Let's go ahead and get started on reviews.
Here are this week's reviews.
This week we have Mass.
How many people are coming?
There'll be 4 of them.
Richard, Linda, this is Jay and Gail Perry.
Thank you for agreeing to meet us.
You're welcome.
I'm going to leave you alone. Let me know if you need anything.
You say you want to heal. Is this how?
We're not here to attack you, and we promise that. We want to know how this happened. We need your help with that.
I'm willing to help.
When you talk about blame on your part, I want to know what you're referring to.
It's very hard to answer.
Well, please try.
It's not just one thing.
Tell me about your son.
What would you like to know?
Everything. I want to know everything.
Why?
Why do I want to know about your son? Because he killed mine.
It's not our fault, Richard.
So this is a very very intimate film. Really, 4 major roles here. For a good portion of the running time, it's just these 4 people in a room. Mm-hmm. You see there. This is the directorial debut of Fran Kranz, who's an actor you may have seen in some Joss Whedon stuff like Dollhouse.
You may know him as the stoner from Cabin in the Woods.
Yes, yeah, Cabin in the Woods, Dollhouse, that Much Ado About Nothing that he did right after the Avengers. Anyway, Cody, tell us about Mass and what you thought of it.
Yeah, well, so I saw Mass at its premiere at Sundance in January, and it was my favorite film from Sundance. I thought it was the best movie. It kind of stuck with me for a little while, and I kept thinking about it throughout the last few months, and was wondering, what it would be like outside of the confines of the festival, and watching it again, and I think my opinions remain pretty much unchanged. So. I'm going to get into a little bit of the plot, which I think that the movie and the trailer kind of treat it as not necessarily a spoiler, but they kind of hold it back a little bit. But it's kind of impossible to talk about the movie without talking about the plot. So, basically, we come to, the movie starts with them with the people that are like employees of a church trying to set up a room, and that like some kind of meeting is happening, and there's a lot of tension happening, and then the 4 people walk into a room. And then, it's a little bit awkward. It's a little bit stilted. And then after some conversation opens up, and someone, which is Martha Plimpton's character in that clip, kind of finally mentions why they're both there, or why they're all there, which is that the parents, it's 2 sets of parents, Martha Plimpton and Jason Isaacs. Their son was killed in a school shooting by the son of the other two characters played by Reed Birney and Dowd, and they are there to kind of talk it out. And like from that moment forward, when we get the information that that's why they're there, I think the movie just becomes completely transfixing, and it's hard to look away, and it's hard to, for me, I was just completely wrapped in the story and in the conversations from that point. And, like you said, it's very much a intimate film with just these four actors. Kind of feels like a play a bit, in that, they're trading off these really long monologues and discussions, but I think that there's two main things about the film that really impress me. The first is the acting. I think it's just an absolute acting clinic. I mean, all four of these actors are doing probably career best work, and it's really hard to single anyone out because I think they're all extremely good. I think that, watching it the second time, Reed Birney, who plays the school shooter's father, kind of jumped out at me a little bit more this time around. His character's the kind of like the toughest to dig into because he seems a little bit guarded, in a little bit distant from some of these things, but his performance really stuck out for me. And Dowd is always really good in basically everything, and that continues here. I think maybe the two people to highlight, though, are Martha Plimpton and Jason Isaacs, where Plimpton probably has the most arc of any character in the movie. Yeah. And to watch her kind of go from where she starts to where she ends up, she delivers some really fantastic monologues, and you can see her like really going through this range of emotion. And then for me, Jason Isaacs, I think, is probably the best actor in or best performance of the film, where like there's just something about his performance where you can just see it in his eyes to just like he just looks like so stricken with grief and like and like so pained, and to hear him kind of deliver again these monologues talking about his son and the responsibility of the parents and all of that. I just think that the performances are just stunning. And I think the second part that impresses me about the movie is that it is a subject matter that not only has not really. First of all, it's really difficult to pull off, I think. But I don't even know that anyone has tried this specifically. Like, there's been movies that have had like school shootings at like as a topic, but to put it from the perspective of like the parents of the children involved in those shootings, I don't think anyone has really ever tried before, to my knowledge. And
what we need to talk about Kevin.
Yeah,
springs to mind.
True.
That's a lot of it is the parents of is it Tony Collette as one of the parents, and we need to talk
John
about
C.
Kevin.
Reilly, I think.
Yeah, and Ezra Miller was Kevin. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
That's the one that really springs to mind.
Yeah, that is true. But I think the thing that's most fascinating about it is that Fran Kranz has this perspective of like, it's not necessarily asking or like imploring you to have empathy for the parents of this shooter, but it is asking you to listen to their perspective. And I think that's the best thing that it does, is that it doesn't impose an opinion or a viewpoint on you, but it does, go through the really complicated idea of, having empathy for the parents who are trying to reconcile the child that they raised with the person that he became, that was capable of this terrible, horrible thing, and who he actually was at his core, and the challenge of that reconciliation. So the movie is really challenging, in my opinion. I think that it really challenges the audience to like look at this perspective and hear the perspective. And I think there's going to be some people who won't like who will dismiss it because asking for empathy for someone like that, I think, might be a little bit difficult for some. But for me, I found it really challenging and a challenging perspective. And I think that it brings up the topic of school shootings, which is necessary to talk about because it's so goddamn prevalent, unfortunately. And it does so without being exploitive or being like or being sort of sensationalized at all. And I think that it toes that line really well. And so for me, it's just this really complicated and complex conversation. And that's what you're watching. You're watching them try to work this out and talk over it. They're seeking answers, but these answers can't be found. and I think that's the really complicated part, is that, the parents of the victim are there seeking answers, but I think part of them knows that they're not going to get what they're looking for in terms of understanding why any more than they already do now, but they're still exploring it. So for me, it's this very complex character piece that, again, challenges the viewer to think about, the perspective of both, the victim and the perpetrator, and the families, and just the devastation that it does to everyone. And so for me, I can't say enough great things about the film. I just think it's such a, it's Fran Kranz's first movie, and as a debut, it's very, very good.
Yeah, sorry, I should correct myself. It was Tilda Swinton in We Need to Talk About Kevin, not Toni Collette. Sorry. Anyway, yeah, so I didn't know what to expect with this movie. I think you and I had talked about it before, but I didn't know exactly what the plot line was. And I will admit to being a tad frustrated when the film started, because you get what do you say, 15 minutes of this setup that's intentionally vague.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little bit maddening right off the top. And I kind of feel like that's, I don't know the narrative purpose of that going forward, other than to kind of tease out this thing. That said, once it gets to the meat of the story, I think it is really transfixing. I think the biggest accomplishment and the biggest compliment I can give is that it feels like, you would be watching a play, but it doesn't feel like it's a translated play. Like, nobody's acting to the back of the room. Mm-hmm. No lines are overwritten. It's just really, really well done. And there's realistic conversations that are happening.
Yeah.
The idea that, that this, the student, the kid that ends up being the shooter, that his parents have had these warning signs, but what are they supposed to do other than what they did? And then the victim's parents asking, well, how could you possibly let this happen? It just, these unanswerable questions that keep kind of going back and forth. It's just really what it is. It's the reality of the situation. I think a really striking moment is one of the conversations where the parents of the shooter have to talk about how no church would memorialize their son. They had to have a funeral in secret, basically, because here's this person that doesn't, that no one wants to see as anything other than this monster. And that is a weird thing coming from the world of news in the past now. People are very, very, very reactive to naming the perpetrator of an event like this, and then providing any details about their life. So much so that some organizations don't even mention the name after the initial wave of coverage, which I don't necessarily believe in. I mean, you have to understand that these things have memorializing the victims obviously is what society wants to do, but you have to understand that this comes from someplace as well. And asking people to have sympathy for the parents, while some may see that as a massive slap in the face to the victims, they're still, in a sense, victims of on their own, mourning the loss of their son and the failures that they had to endure. And I mean, it's just a really complex emotional story. I think it maybe ties up a little too tidily at the end. I think it's okay though. I think it's forgiven, because I don't know that we could just leave this situation unresolved.
I will say really quickly on that ending piece, the thing that struck me the most, because I actually forgot about this when I watched it again, is the movie sort of ends and they disperse, and then there's a moment where Ann Dowd comes back, and I think that moment is just like a ton of bricks hitting moment that I think really helps punctuate the movie. This time around.
There's also some imagery I don't really know what it's about. There's a field. I'm not entirely sure what that's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I was paying attention to the movie, and I still don't understand that part. But whatever. I mean, it's great performances, some tiny little story details. I think that whole prologue is kind of maddeningly vague, to the point of being a minor irritant to the rest of the film.
I'm with you on that. I think you could shave 10 minutes off the top of the movie and kind of start them. Like, just, you could start that movie with just like a quick montage of a setup and then them entering the room, and I think it would be perfectly fine. I do think that it's there to kind of show like the meticulous nature of like trying to get this moment exactly right, and like to be aware of the surroundings, and like, you know, you can't get, if you get one thing wrong, you could potentially like ruin this moment and make it uncomfortable, and like just this sort of tension in the air, I think. But I think it is maybe a little bit too long, but given what follows, for me, it's a bit of a nitpick. And for me personally, I don't want to hold it against everything else that follows.
No, and I'm not trying to. I'm just saying that it's
a fair,
as an experience as a whole. Yeah. What's your grade for Mass, Cody?
Yeah, I mean, flat out, it's the best movie I've seen this year, and I think that it is. It has the best performances I've seen this year. It's probably the best script I've seen this year. You brought up a really good point, which is that it has this level of authenticity to it that it, for me, like really shines through, where these feel like actual conversations. You know, from a standpoint of trauma, from a standpoint of, you know, what the complexity of these feelings might be, to you know, kind of just everything about it feels very authentic, very raw, very real. So I give it an A-.
Yeah, I'm going to do that too. A- for me. I think, minor tiny nitpicks aside, I think it's one of the most transfixing movies I've seen all year. And super authentic. I mean, like, painfully authentic.
It's
like,
a tough watch. It's hard to watch at times.
Yeah. All right, that's going to do it for this week. By the way, we talked about it. We skipped James Bond this week because neither of us wanted to invest the time in a movie that's getting middling reviews. So
yeah, look, I mean, 2 hours and 45 minutes. I don't know if I can.
It's sitting at like 60-something% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's at 84.
Oh, is it? I thought maybe I was looking at something else. Yeah. Sorry. If you wanted to hear our thoughts about No Time to Die, we'll wait till it's on TBS or TNT in 4 years, maybe. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this week. Next week, Cody, we might be skipping next week. It's my anniversary weekend, so I might call an audible here. But
we need to talk about that off mic.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll still do it. But it's Halloween Kills and something else. I forget.
The Last Duel.
The Last Duel. Oh yes. All right, if you want to reach us, you can email us at podcast@cinesnob.net. You can find us on Twitter at CineSnob, Facebook CineSnob Critic, CineSnobNet, YouTube.com/CineSnob. Cody, still on break for the Ramble?
Yeah, but I think we might be back next week or the following week. We'll see. I think we're at the finish line there. So
Cool. Well, good to hear. Anything else before we go?
I don't think so.
All right. On that note, I am Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
Thank you for listening to the CineSnob Podcast. To read reviews, interviews, and more, visit CineSnob.net. See you next week.